Welcome to a place where love is told not as a fantasy, but as it truly unfolds, raw, unexpected, and deeply alive. Here, silence after heartbreak is not the end, but the beginning of something waiting to awaken. We share stories where a single spark can shatter years of loneliness, where the body remembers desire, and the soul rediscovers its fire. These are not tales bound by age, judgment, or fear. They are living proof that passion and peace can meet, that true love is never gone, only waiting to return in ways no one sees coming. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever believed love had passed you by, this is your sanctuary, a place where connection breathes again, and where true love writes itself in every heartbeat. The silence after divorce was not just an absence of sound. It was an emptiness that swallowed everything once alive inside. There was a time when laughter echoed through the walls, when footsteps felt like music, when even arguments meant connection. But after the papers were signed, the silence grew thick, like a shadow that pressed against the skin. It was in the mornings, waking up to a bed that felt too wide, sheets untouched on one side. It was in the evenings, eating at a table meant for two, now set with only one plate. At first, there was denial. A voice whispering that it was just a phase, that healing would come quickly, that independence could fill the hollow places. But nights proved that wrong. Nights became the cruelest companion, stretching endlessly with no warmth, no arms to fold into, no breath against the neck. The bed was cold, not from the absence of a body, but from the absence of love. Days felt no lighter. Work, routines, and errands filled the hours, but every task carried a quiet ache. A smile exchanged with a stranger, a couple holding hands on the street, the sight of someone laughing without fear, all of it stung. Not because of jealousy, but because of the haunting thought that such things had been lost forever. Love had ended, not with a sudden strike, but with the slow decay of trust, care, and intimacy. Desire was the cruelest memory. Once, it had been a fire that burned with ease, with no effort to spark it, a fire that lit up the nights and spilled into the mornings. But after the divorce, desire felt like a story from another lifetime. The body was alive, but untouched. The skin remembered what it once meant to be caressed, kissed, held close, but now those memories only sharpened the loneliness. There were moments when the body longed, but the heart whispered, "No one will ever see you that way again." It wasn't only about touch, though. It was about being wanted, not out of duty or habit, but out of hunger, out of love, out of a raw need that went beyond skin. After the divorce, that kind of want felt impossible. Who would ever look with eyes that burned with passion? Who would ever make the soul feel alive again? It was easier to believe it was over, that love had been buried with the marriage, that what was left was simply survival. Loneliness grew into something heavier than sadness. It was a kind of emptiness that seeped into every corner of life. Walking through the house was like walking through memories that would never return. There were echoes of moments that no longer belonged, the sound of laughter that wasn't real anymore, the warmth of embraces that had long faded, the presence of a love that had once promised forever. That promise had shattered, and in its place was silence. Friends tried to help, but their words couldn't touch the depth of what was lost. You'll find someone new. You just need time. They didn't understand that it wasn't just about someone new. It was about believing that love itself could live again. And when that belief is gone, time doesn't heal, it only stretches the silence further. The hardest part was the mirror. Looking into it meant seeing not just age, but the weight of heartbreak. It meant seeing the lines carved by pain, the eyes that no longer carried a spark, the body that had forgotten how it felt to be adored. Each reflection whispered the same cruel truth. Love was over. There was no return. There was only acceptance of the quiet, acceptance of the emptiness, acceptance that passion was a closed chapter. And so life continued in a kind of numbness. Smiles were practiced, conversations were polite, Days moved forward, but underneath it all was the same truth. Nights were heavy, days were quiet, and the memory of desire lived like a ghost that haunted, reminding of what had been lost and what would never come again. That silence became a prison, and in that prison, the belief grew stronger. Love had drained away, and there was no reason to hope for its return. It felt final. It happened when least expected, in the most ordinary of moments, when the heart had already convinced itself that love was gone forever. There was no plan, no anticipation, no thought of meeting someone who could shift the very ground beneath the feet. He appeared like a quiet flame in the dark, soft but steady, his presence carrying a warmth that was felt before it was even understood. He was younger, undeniably so, and that fact alone should have kept the walls high, should have stopped the heart from daring to notice. Yet his eyes cut through every layer of defense, seeing something that had long been forgotten, something that had been buried under years of silence and loss. The first time his gaze lingered, it was unsettling. Not because it was unwelcome, but because it awakened something that had been asleep for too long. There was nothing reckless about it, nothing careless or fleeting. His eyes carried a boldness, but it was gentle, as if he wasn't demanding to be let in, but simply waiting for permission. And in that gaze, something shifted. A part of the soul that had been numb stirred, and suddenly the air felt different, charged in a way that made the heart beat faster. Conversations began simply, almost too simply, as if they belonged to any ordinary day. Words about nothing, laughter over little things, moments that shouldn't have mattered, but each one planted something deeper. His voice had a way of reaching into the quiet, softening it, making it less heavy. It wasn't just his words, but the way he listened, as though every thought mattered, as though nothing said was too small to be worth his attention. In a world where invisibility had become a constant companion, suddenly being seen was overwhelming. And there it was, the spark, not the reckless spark of youth that burns quickly and fades, but the unexpected one, the one that comes after believing the fire had gone out forever. His presence wasn't loud or demanding, but it was steady, undeniable. With him, silence no longer felt empty. It felt alive, filled with possibility. The difference in age should have been the wall, the unbreakable line, but instead, it became the reminder that connection isn't measured in years. His youth was not a barrier, it was a mirror. Through him, forgotten parts of the soul began to surface again, the playful, the daring, the passionate. He did not see brokenness or scars or years gone by. He saw only what was alive, what was still burning quietly beneath the surface, waiting to be touched. There were moments of resistance, of pulling back, whispering that this was impossible, that it was dangerous to feel this way again. But every time his presence dissolved the fear, it wasn't just attraction, though it was undeniable. It was the way he made every word, every glance, every accidental touch feel like it carried meaning. His hand brushing against the arm didn't feel accidental. His smile didn't feel casual. Each moment built into something that no longer could be ignored. And with each passing day, warmth began to spread where coldness had lived for too long. It wasn't about filling a void or replacing what was lost. It was about awakening what was still there, what had never truly died, even if it had been silenced. The heart began to remember its own rhythm, the body began to remember desire, and the soul began to believe again. The spark was not just in him, it was in the way he made every part of life feel brighter. The air felt lighter, colors sharper, laughter easier. What had once been routine became alive again. The world had not changed, but the way it was seen had. All because of the way he entered it, unexpectedly, with his quiet boldness and unshakable presence. It was terrifying to feel so much, to realize how easily walls were crumbling, how quickly defenses were fading. Yet it was also the most alive feeling in years. The loneliness that had once felt permanent was being replaced by something real, something undeniable, and in the quiet moments when his eyes found their way across the room and met again, it was clear that he felt it too. It didn't need to be spoken aloud. The spark was there, living between every glance, every pause, every shared silence. It was a fire that neither had asked for, but both knew had already begun to burn. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the heart whispered a truth that had been buried. Love was not over. It was only waiting to be found again. It began so softly, almost without notice, like a seed planted in quiet earth. Conversations that first seemed simple, casual, unassuming, slowly grew roots. His words lingered after he spoke them, echoing in places that had been empty for far too long. The way he listened, the way he cared to hear every detail, it made the walls fall piece by piece without resistance. What had started as a comfort became something deeper, something undeniable, a current that pulled closer without asking permission. There were moments when laughter spilled effortlessly, moments when silence felt like its own language, moments when a glance carried more weight than entire sentences. The bond did not need to be named. It lived in the way hearts leaned closer, in the way time passed too quickly when he was near. That closeness began to stir something that had long been forgotten, something buried beneath years of solitude and resignation. The body remembered before the mind did, a brush of his hand against mine, a touch so brief it could have been dismissed, but it wasn't. It stayed, it burned, it awoke a desire thought to be gone, a warmth that spread slowly at first, then rushed like fire through cold veins. Breath caught in the chest, not because of fear, but because of recognition of hunger, of longing, of the kind of passion that had once been lived and loved, but had since been abandoned to silence. Every conversation began to feel like foreplay, every word like a step closer to something inevitable. His presence ignited a pulse that had been quiet for too long. The soul stirred with the thrill of being wanted, truly wanted, not out of obligation, not out of routine, but out of pure desire. It was in the way his eyes lingered too long, the way his smile curved knowingly, the way his nearness carried heat that made the skin ache for touch. And then it happened. What had been hidden beneath words and glances broke into the open. A touch, longer this time, intentional, steady, fingers that traced along skin as if they had always belonged there, a kiss hesitant only for a moment, then deep, hungry, pulling years of emptiness into a single breath. The body, starved for so long, answered without hesitation, without fear. It remembered everything, the way to ache, the way to melt, the way to surrender. Desire came back like a storm, sweeping through every defense, leaving nothing untouched. The quiet between us filled with gasps, with the rhythm of hearts that no longer knew silence. It was not just the body, though the body burned with every touch, every press of skin to skin. It was the soul rediscovering what it meant to be alive, what it meant to be seen in both strength and vulnerability, what it meant to be adored. Each moment felt sacred, even in its hunger. There was no rush, no impatience, only the sweet ache of rediscovery. The warmth of his hands, the weight of his body, the tenderness that blended with passion, it was all proof that desire was not gone, only waiting, sleeping, aching for the right touch to awaken it again. And in that awakening, love revealed itself, not the love of convenience or promise, not the kind that fades with years of routine. This was love born in the fire of passion, in the raw connection of souls that recognized each other. It was proof that passion and love are not separate, but one that to be desired deeply is also to be cherished, that to be touched with hunger is also to be held with reverence. The nights no longer stretched endlessly in silence. They were filled with whispers, with the sound of breathing shared, with the warmth of two bodies tangled in both need and tenderness. Mornings carried the sweetness of lingering touches, the joy of waking not to emptiness but to eyes that mirrored the same desire, the same depth of feeling. It was a rediscovery of self as much as it was of love. The body, once convinced it had grown invisible, bloomed again under his touch. The soul, once resigned to loneliness, rose again, alive with every moment shared. Every kiss, every caress, every glance was a reminder that love is not bound by age or circumstance. It comes when it chooses, ignites where it will, and once lit, it cannot be ignored. What began as tender conversation had become a fire, one that burned not to destroy but to restore, to breathe life into places that had long been silent. And in that fire, passion was not only reborn, it became the truest expression of love itself. For the first time in years, body and soul were alive again. True love revealed itself in ways that words will never fully capture. It was not in the grand gestures or in the promises of forever, but in the quiet certainty of being seen. There was something disarming in the way his eyes lingered, not on the surface, not on the marks time had left, but on something deeper, something untouched by years or heartbreak. To be looked at like that, with a gaze that carried no judgment, no comparison, no expectation, it was like being discovered again for the first time. It felt different from anything known before. Love in the past had always seemed tied to conditions, to youth, to beauty, to roles played, to expectations met. But here, there was no need to prove worth. There was no performance, no mask to wear. Just being enough as is. His touch was not about possession, but about cherishing. Every caress carried patience, reverence, a silent vow that this connection was not fragile, not fleeting. Passion had been rediscovered, yes, in the fire of breathless touches and hungry kisses, but passion alone was not what defined this. What made it deeper was the peace that wrapped around it. The peace of resting in arms without fear of being left. The peace of speaking without the need to hide. The peace of knowing that love could be both gentle and wild, both tender and consuming. Age should have mattered, but it didn't. The years between us were supposed to be a barrier, a reminder of differences, but they dissolved in the intimacy of shared moments. Love was not measured in time, but in presence. When he looked into my eyes, he did not see numbers or years. He saw the soul, raw and unguarded, and in his gaze I saw myself reflected in ways I hadn't in decades. It was like being reborn into someone else's belief that I was worthy of both desire and devotion. The past wounds, the scars of betrayal, the silence of loneliness, all of them had shaped me, but none of them defined what we were. In his presence, those scars did not feel like burdens. They became reminders of the strength that had carried me here, to this place where love could bloom again. He did not flinch at them, did not try to erase them. He held them as part of the whole, loving not despite them, but with them. True love was in the way laughter returned, unexpected and free, spilling out in moments of playfulness that seemed impossible after so many heavy years. It was in the way silence felt full rather than empty, in the comfort of lying beside him with no words and still feeling understood. It was in the way desire did not burn alone but intertwined with tenderness, as if each kiss whispered both hunger and devotion. It was not about needing him, and it was not about him completing me. It was about finding a connection that allowed both of us to be fully alive, fully present, fully ourselves. That was the gift. To be wanted not just for a body, not just for companionship, but for the entirety of a soul that had thought its best days were behind it. There was no fear of time, no dread of what might come. The present was enough, and yet it felt eternal. Each moment stretched, filled with meaning, with touch, with breath, with the certainty that this love had no boundary, no ending point. It lived in every look, every embrace, every whisper in the dark. And in that truth, something deeper was understood. Love is not about who arrives at what stage in life, or about who fits what role. It is about the raw intimacy of being known, of being seen beyond the surface, beyond the years, beyond the past. It is about being held with both passion and gentleness, being cherished not for what was lost or what remains, but simply for being. This love was not a second chance. It was not a replacement. It was something entirely its own, a story written not to erase what came before, but to prove that the heart never truly runs out of its ability to feel. Love does not end. It waits, it shifts, it surprises. And when it returns, it comes with a depth that only time, loss, and rediscovery can give. The meaning of true love is this: not bound by age, not broken by wounds, not silenced by judgment. It is passion and peace breathing together, fire and stillness living as one. It is proof that even when the world says love has passed, it can return more alive than ever. True love has no ending point. If this story touched you, let it stay with you. Love is never finished. It is waiting, alive, and closer than you think. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so you never miss the next story that might remind you of your own. Until then, let love live in you.